Hello and welcome. We have a ton of new information on the different type of pals like Alpha, Lucky, Fusion, Boss pals, different spheres, advanced tips and tricks to catch them. So we're going to run through that. Also, I'll give you a rundown of breeding pals and infusing pals and touch on enhancing just to give you a basic understanding. This will give you a basic understanding of how you could generate the strongest type of pals, just to give you a good idea so you can hit the ground running when you start playing Palworld. This will be relevant now and definitely later. I will do a much more in-depth up dive on this. But before we get into catching pals, we need to understand that the mechanism of catching is similar to Pokemon. You'll have your Pokeballs, aka your spheres. There's 5 you get generally easy access to, which is the blue sphere, which is your Pal sphere. That's just a very basic for low level. Your Mega sphere, which is green, allows you to capture stronger pals. And then you'll have your Giga, your Hyper, and your Ultra spheres. Again, each different sphere just enables you to catch stronger and more difficult pals. They will also generally help catch the lower level pals easier too. Now, there is a little caveat to this, and we're kind of jumping the gun to this, but say for the very rare shiny pals that we're going to be talking about soon, probably find you won't be able to catch them with the lower level Pal balls. You probably want to start at something pretty significant like a Giga Hyper. Otherwise, you'll find that it may not be possible. So if you're on a mission and scooting around the world map and you're the appropriate level, definitely always carry a ton of the higher level spheres in case you come across a shiny. Do note that you start off the Pal sphere, which is the blue one, and then as you level up, you'll gain access to more research technology, which will include the different Pal spheres. So pals are kind of broken into categories. You'll have your very common pals, which are just everywhere. Nothing particular special about them. They're just your common. Then you'll have your alpha pals. Find these out in the open, in the wild, possibly dungeons. And these are typically much stronger versions of regular pals. Sometimes, oftenly, you can find them leading a group of their kind. They generally possess enhanced stats, unique colorations, special abilities to their counterparts. And it's definitely a much more challenging experience to capture them. Probably need a higher tier of sphere. Then we'll move on to lucky pals or shiny pals. However, that name is interchangeable. Basically, these are extremely rare pals that are generally much larger than their counterparts. Generally very easy to tell because they'll be shiny with a little light animation and be much bigger. Their traits and abilities can increase resource drops, improve capture rates, and have much better stats abilities. So very unique and a very sought after element to the game of catching pals is you always want to try and capture these lucky pals. They're rare, better stats, better pretty much overall pals that you can capture. Then you'll have your boss pals. Now, boss pals are generally attached to a trainer. They're kind of like your gyms, and they're very strong, very powerful, are normally associated to the quest, or aka those sort of gym, those characters that either sit on them or use them themselves. Requires a lot of strategy and can be very difficult, especially if you do come unequipped or with the wrong kind of pals. You do want to make sure that you're using a pal that's more effective against that particular type. So you definitely can't capture boss pals. You could also say that there's an elemental pal, which is generally a pal that has been bred and has ended up with a different element or multiple element to its normal counterpart's base element. Now, that can be done through breeding, which is just basically involve 2 pals that are compatible types or species to produce an offspring or egg. And the cool thing with this system is that when you do breed, you can get the parents' inherent unique traits or a combination, and it can also add an additional element type, which leads to some very unique possibilities with doing selective breeding. Do note that you can breed any pal with any other pal, which is kind of crazy. Does get your head scratching, but key thing is that you can also breed any shiny pal with another shiny pal to yield really good results. So definitely give that a go, and just remember you will need a lot of cake for your breeding. The results from breeding, from my understanding, is pretty random, so there's no guarantees you're going to get a set pal with a given combination, but I'll have to test this. But I'll have to cover breeding in much more detail later because there's a lot to it and I want to understand the mechanic much more. And then there is the fusion pals. Now, but you can think of it more as infusion. And to do that, you will need to be level 14 at least and have the ancient technology called the Pal Essence Condenser. And what you can do with this, collect a lot of the same type of pal. They are fire, fox, get a ton of those, and then go to your Pal Essence Condenser. Then you can select the same type of pal that you'd like to infuse. Then you would sacrifice or infuse all those caught pals of the same type into the one in your deck or the one you want to increase its stats and powers. Won't go go too much into this, but that's just to give you just a quick idea of how the infuse works. And then there's also the enhance. So by infusing all those souls, you'll increase the star level on your pal, and then you'll have to do the same process again, but I think it's like double the amount of that specific pal again that you'll need to capture to then infuse again to get another star, and then you can repeat that process up until you get a 4-star on your pal, making it as basically as strong as it can be. And the other way to increase the power of your pals is just to use the enhanced pal statue, which is like a statue of the Anubis pal, and then you can enhance pals by sacrificing pal souls, so other pals that you've caught. But this time you can actually specifically target what you'd want to increase, whether it's max health, attack, defense, or work speed. But yeah, that's just a quick summary. You can power up your pals this way. Again, I'll cover this in much more detail down the track. That's kind of what you'd consider fused pals. You've infused a bunch of other pals into it to make it stronger. The last thing I just want to mention on breeding is that when you think about it, you get your pal 4-star and enhance it with the statue, and it's a shining, so you've maxed it all out as much as possible, and then you breed it with another max as possible. I want to see what will happen. Can we push the stats even further? That kind of covers the different type of pals. Common, your alpha pals, which you find out in the wild, that are bigger, stronger, kind of like mini boss fights. Your lucky or shiny pals, which are generally bigger, have a shining animation, very rare, big stats, better drops, always catch those. Then you have your boss pals, which you'll find in dungeons or in events or the kind of gym situations. Now, apparently there are legendary pals. There's only a few of those, but we'll cover that in a bit more detail down the track. So we have a good understanding of the different types. And of course, there's obviously the fusion pals and technically the elemental pals. And just like Pokemon, there are 9 different elements. These are dark, dragon, earth, electric, flame, frost, grass, neutral, and water. So there are 9, and majority of the pals in Palworld only have 1 element type, and then you can breed them to give them 2 or use fusion depending on the situation. But some pals that you find out in the wild will have 2 elements, and I believe you can probably mix around with the ones that have 2 elements to give them 2 new ones. Now I'll put up a little picture of how the super effectiveness works. Now let's go into some of the tips and tricks to catching pals. Palworld offers quite a visual and easy to understand capture mechanism where you will see your percent chance, meaning what is the likelihood that you'll be able to capture that pal within that given moment. Now do note, like if you're really high level and you throw a higher level sphere, like a mega sphere at something that's quite low level, you can get them at 0%. It's not an exact science of what gives you. You know, if it's at 50%, you could still catch it. But generally, as you get to the higher level, you do really need to weaken pals and then use the right sphere to catch them or to increase your chances of catching them. So you would have to use like an ultra sphere on a very high level pal and have them at low health in order to catch them. There's also the stealth approach. So sneaking up to a pal, catching them off guard will give you capture bonus. Also sneaking up on them, and if they have their back turned to you, will also give you a capture bonus, increasing your likelihood of catching them when they're unaware or facing away from you. So if you can do both, you'll get a nice bonus. Then you'll obviously need to use your right sphere. That will increase your likelihood. You'll also have pals that have special abilities that will aid you and increase your chances of capturing pals. Another big aspect into increasing your chances of capturing is infusing status elements. These can increase potential chances. Now, what are the status elements? So that's like things like poison, paralysis, sleep, burn, freeze, confusion, bewilderness, weakness, and slow. Don't know if that's an exact complete list, but it gives you an idea. So there's certain pals or items that can inflict those type of status elements, which will then give you more access, more likelihood to capture the pal as well. Now, as attractive as it is capturing higher level pals, from my understanding, there is no real need to, because as soon as you capture them, their level will shrink down to your current level. So keep that in mind. Also, consider your pal synergy and your pal's abilities. You obviously want to use more of a combat pal if you're trying to catch a lot of different pals or roaming around the map. And then also consider your pal synergy, like certain weapons that you use, and then certain partner active and passive abilities, which will then help promote that weapon, item, or another pal, which would lead us into a crucial aspect to the game too, which I mentioned earlier, which is pals will have partner ability. Pals will have unique skills and abilities that play a significant role in the gameplay. Here's what we know about what they call partner skills and active skills. So the partner skill, this will mean that pals possess a partner skill that are unique to their species. For example, we do have some evidence of this in a video from the official Palworld site. You have Pyrin as a partner skill that turns all the players' attack into fire attacks, which means this is going to be more beneficial and do more damage against, say, maybe a leaf type, making you more like a super effective effective against different types. So this is another really cool combination or anchor point that drives this awesome synergy by using different pals to achieve better outcomes. Partner skills can provide various buffs and enhancements to players' abilities, and this is again going to depend on all the different pals that you're partnered with. Okay, and then you have your active abilities, and they are specific skills or actions that a pal can perform, usually during combat or under certain conditions. They require activation by the player, either by selecting them during a battle or using them in specific scenarios. An example of this could be a healing or a buffing skill that needs to be triggered, or an attack move that deals damage to an opponent, or an ability that interacts with the environment like breaking down barriers or illuminating darkness. They do often come with a cooldown or potentially a resource cost like energy or stamina. Then you have your passive abilities. Passive abilities, they're just an ongoing effect or bonus that don't require an active player involvement to function. They just automatically take effect under the certain conditions or just throughout the gameplay. Basically just always on. They can consist of a boost, defense, or attack. Could be an ability that increases the rate of resource collection and drop rates and so on. Now you can also use some capture traps to capture pals, and there's some defensive traps, but we'll save those for another time. We'll get into that in more detail later. But that should really give you just a good understanding what the different type of pals are, their elements, what spheres are there, what are some of the techniques and improvements that can help increase your chances of capturing a pal.